Hey guys, thanks for joining us for episode 5. We've got a very special breakdown of March Madness with our resident expert, Keiton Hall. Let's just hop right into it. We're here with our special guest this week, Keiton Hall. He's a friend of ours from Manchester. He played basketball there. And Keiton, how's the retired life treating you now that you're not a college athlete anymore?
It's definitely different. It's weird watching games that I used to be wanting to play in, and now knowing that I don't really have that outlet anymore. But it's been nice to have my body not hurt 24/7. It's been the main beneficial factor for sure. Gives me some time to explore life outside of basketball a little bit. So there's some pros and cons to it for sure.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. Well, now that the Manchester soccer's gotten going, it feels like you should still be out there almost. And
100%.
but I can definitely speak to the no aches and pains is definitely a bonus.
hmm Yeah, that was honestly, I didn't realize how kind of quick it was going to happen. But my feet, ankles, knees, legs went from being an old man walking to this past summer. I was like, wow, I haven't felt this good in years.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I don't miss the fitness tests and all that part of it, but it was weird seeing like the 4 or 5 people that I knew still on the team, like starting or whatever, and like knowing like, wow, I used to know all those guys. Like it's just a weird experience, like a weird angle of it, but it happens.
Yeah, definitely.
So being the basketball guy that you are, I think you are our resident basketball expert. So we're just going to hop right into the thick of things. March Madness. Who got snubbed? What are you happy with about the bracket? Kind of give us your general thoughts there.
The first one might come as a little shock considering a Michigan guy, but I think Michigan State deserved a non-play-in game considering how they finished the season. I mean, they had one of the best resumes in the country in terms of top tier wins. I mean, they won 3 top 10 games within the last 2 weeks of the season, and they ended up having to play against UCLA in one of the first 4 games. So I think that was one of the first ones. I thought Louisville had a good shot. If they would have beaten Duke in the ACC tournament, that would have helped a lot. And then that was kind of a case where some unexpected conference tournament winners like Georgetown won and potentially pushed them out of the bubble. I don't think there was a ton of other ones though. I think this year with all the COVID pauses and things like that, it was an added kind of factor for the committee to kind of look into. So I definitely don't envy them being the people that decide who gets in and who doesn't.
For sure. I definitely thought the mid-majors got a little bit more respect this year than maybe they had in the past, which is something that I liked. But like you mentioned, Georgetown and some of those teams that won the conference tournament kind of stealing bids away from guys like Louisville and some people that, were our regulars in the NCAA tournament that we aren't seeing this year.
Yep. Yeah, it was weird not seeing Duke and Kentucky in it. I can't lie. Like, I think that I saw this is the first time they both haven't been in it since like the 70s or something like that.
Plus somebody like IU and I think it's cool how if a team does have to like drop out because of COVID, I think how they have those standby teams, that could be a really, I mean, obviously unfortunate, but that could be a really cool element to where like they could just fill in at a certain point, and that could be add some drama, really bust some brackets too.
That'd be a whole new element to the Cinderella story.
Yeah.
Literally out of the tournament, and then you get called in and potentially win a game. Like, that'd be a special kind of weekend.
And could you imagine maybe you're like a 1 through 4 seed and then your team drops out and all of a sudden you have to play Louisville? Like,
that'd be tough.
That would be crazy.
Yeah, I do not envy anybody in this tournament that has to deal with all the COVID potential drops. Because I think you have to have five or 7 players test negative for 5 straight days in order to avoid that kind of getting kicked out. So that would just be, can you imagine how bad you'd feel if you were one of those players that had COVID and forced your team to get out of the tournament? I'd stay with you the rest of your life.
And even guys like Kansas right now, they had to drop out of their conference tournament, and I think they have 3 guys. They didn't release their names or whatever, but they have 3 guys and so it could be the 3 walk-ons, or it could be, the best player on the team. And that makes a whole difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. 'Cause, I mean, we saw how it happened in the NFL and how other leagues have kind of handled it, but it's all been throughout the course of the season and not a condensed tournament like March Madness is. So it'll be interesting.
For sure. So you mentioned you're a big Michigan guy. Why Michigan?
So I grew up, funny enough, about 5 minutes away from Michigan State campus. And half of my family, most of my friends are Michigan State fans, but my dad got to me early on. Uh, I know that I was maybe a little bit of a State fan growing up, but then my dad showed me one of the games of Michigan beating Michigan State by about 40 in a football game, and I was converted forever. So it's been some ups and downs the past few years, 2010s, late 2000s, but we're sitting pretty in basketball right now, so it's been a good experience for sure.
Where do you think? Well, we'll get into it, but how do you think they stack up so far for this tournament? Like, do you think they have a real good shot? Obviously, they're sitting on the 1 seed, but they've had some injury troubles, and
I think
how are they looking right now?
Yeah, Livers not being there is definitely a massive blow. Not only from his point production, but he's just one of their leaders and one of their guys that does a lot of things that the stat sheet doesn't show. And so I think they have a lot of depth, which has helped them throughout the course of the season, and that's going to help them this year. So if honestly looking at their game against Ohio State, I thought if they made about half of the shots that were close in that they missed, they would have won the game by 10 plus instead of having it come down to a last second shot. But even so, having that type of offensive kind of off game in terms of shooting and still being in a position to come back and have the chance to win the game at the end, I think gave them a lot of confidence and gave fans a lot of confidence that they can deal without Livers until he is potentially able to come back because they haven't put a timetable on it. But I mean, they're also, in my opinion, in the toughest region, so that doesn't help at all either.
Yeah, there are a lot of good teams down there, but I honestly, getting booted from the Big Ten tournament might actually be beneficial to them. It's another day of rest going into this thing, and they couldn't have really bolstered their stock any by winning the Big Ten tournament. I don't think it would have really changed much, so it actually could be a benefit to the Wolverines here.
Yep. Yeah, that was one of the things that we said about Michigan State, but when they beat us at the end of the season, like obviously you hate to lose a rivalry game, but it didn't change anything in terms of seeding. So if there was a game to lose, it was definitely that
one. So what's the one thing that you think from Michigan that hurts them the most? What's their biggest weakness that if this happens, then all hell breaks loose?
I think if Hunter Dickinson gets in foul trouble early, just because he's such a game changer inside. That's been different from the past years for them, because in the past with Beeline, they've been somewhat reliant on the three, and Dickinson being able to be a post presence, have a traditional kind of back to the basket type player where they can dump it down and get easy buckets down there off putbacks. And it also opens up an inside out element that they haven't necessarily had in the past. So I think that's been one of the biggest separators for them. When Illinois played them, one of the things I noticed is that Illinois' defense was incredibly aggressive, and it kind of threw them out of their rhythm offensively. And so as long as they're able to handle pressure and not let any sort of defense that they'll see potentially in LSU in the second round, as long as they can let that not affect how they perform on offense and not affect their flow, I think that'll help them the most. But it's also one of the biggest weaknesses that I've seen for sure.
And that region kind of plays to that weakness almost. You mentioned LSU, and then they could potentially see Florida State in the next round. They're long, lanky, athletic, and then it goes to Texas and Alabama.
Yep.
All those teams are long, lanky, and will get after you on defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's not to say Michigan can't handle the pressure, because they've definitely played against teams that pressure them a lot. But that was one of the biggest things that was contributing to them having kind of a bad shooting night against Illinois for sure that I saw.
I think them just playing in the Big Ten too is going to be great preparation, because it was such a strong conference this year, and I think 9 teams made it, most of anybody. So I think that's going to be a very it could be advantageous for them as long as it doesn't wear them out too early, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a great point. I thought Big Ten was the best conference this year, but that's also coming from a Midwest bias. But it's also coming from having some basketball experience as well. I think the Big 12 was the second best. ACC was very uncharacteristically bad this year, aside from a few teams. But yeah, Big Ten being able to play in that conference all year is going to help all the teams that got seated a little bit lower, like the Rutgers, like Wisconsin. Like Wisconsin's been on a little skid, but they've also been playing some of the best teams in the country, so that's contributed to that as well. So I'm definitely pro Big Ten for this tournament, but we'll see how it happens.
Yeah, I think they have a good shot, and I think the word that I heard on the selection show like 800 times was battle tested. These Big Ten teams will be battle tested because right, they go once they made it in the conference team. Basically every team that they played is in the tournament. Anyone there weren't any cakewalks this year, which I think made the Big Ten fun to watch throughout the whole season. And then as well as I think you could see some teams shine here and once it's tourney time.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that.
So let's get into your bracket analysis. We'll start with the West region. Are there any big upsets or anything you see in the first round over there?
Two games that I saw kind of initially that I might pick just because upsets are so hard to pick in brackets. UCSB rather over Creighton. Creighton got absolutely demolished by Georgetown. I don't know if that was just a one-time thing or if it was kind of indicative of how their season is kind of going or trending. I think that's one game that to look out for. And then Ohio and Virginia as well. The past few years, I've been a Virginia guy. I picked them to win when they lost in the first round. I picked them to win the next year when they actually won. So it's definitely a different team. I just don't think that this year is as good of a team as they've had in the past, even though they finished first in the ACC. I think part of that was because, like we said, the ACC was uncharacteristically down this year. So I think that's another thing to kind of look out for in that region.
You got to embrace the pace, Keiton.
Right, I know. It's astounding how good their record's been under Bennett when they play the same kind of style and pace of basketball when every other team has gone to a completely different style.
And I think, but that style does, kind of lead towards the more likelihood of an upset just because there's fewer possessions. You have an off shooting night.
Yep.
Ohio can put up some points. They played Illinois really tough earlier in the season. So
yeah, at least right now, I have both those teams being upset. So I called both of those.
Yep.
And so that means I have Ohio in the Sweet 16, which I don't feel great about, but maybe that's Ohio bias. I don't know. But yeah, I usually wouldn't bet against Tony Bennett this early, but I'm going with it for now. But we'll see.
No, that's a good pick. Because, I mean, everybody's all about analytics these days. And one of the things that I saw was a double-digit seed has gotten to the Sweet 16 like 5 out of the past 6 years or something like that. So, I mean, there's your double-digit seed right there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see what kind of comes out of that region. So in the second round, then who do you see advancing maybe through your Final Four, Elite Eight in that mid or in that West region?
I think USC is kind of a dark horse sleeper in this one. They finished second in the Pac-12, even though I'm not a huge Pac-12 guy. They have Evan Mobley, which I think is a big factor when it comes to having one of the top NBA prospects on your team. And kind of whenever those top prospects are the number one guy on their team, they tend to have ability to take over a game when they need to. So I think that could be an element that could really cause some disruption for Iowa, the number 2 seed in that region. Iowa's been a really good team throughout the entire year, but they've also shown a lot more weaknesses than a potential 2 seed should maybe have. Luka Garza is an absolute animal as long as he's not playing against Kofi Cockburn or Hunter Dickinson that made him his son at Michigan. But I think Gonzaga gets to the Final Four in this region just because there's no one really to challenge them in this region, and they haven't had a super tough conference or non-conference schedule. They had some good games earlier on. Their 3 guys, Timmy, Kispert, and Suggs, are legit. So I think that you're going to need a good team to beat them, even though the rep has been kind of, they haven't played anybody, but they're very high-level players. So it's going to be tough for anybody to come out and beat them in that region.
Yeah, Suggs is a baller. He's going to be good even at the next level. And
yeah.
I agree with that USC. I saw something that they're 3rd in the nation in dunks. Like, that means they're getting runouts, they're getting steals, and you don't miss dunks. Like, that's something that doesn't go away. So I like that USC pick too to maybe upset Kansas early and then potentially even Iowa and face Gonzaga there in that Elite Eight.
Yep. Yeah, that's the USC one, the most amount of dunks. That's so much more than 2 points. I mean, you guys know, you've been in those types of environments. That's such a huge momentum boost, especially if it comes on the tail end of a run. It just completely can demoralize the other team.
Nick Malero mentioned the importance of dunks and intramurals on. So
that is unbelievably high level analysis by Nick Malero right there.
He'll be mad that we called you the resident basketball expert too, I'm sure. But
he's the resident NBA expert. He knows more about NBA than I do. The fact that we both like the Pistons because we're both from Michigan, but he's got the West Side Blazers going for him. So it was fun being able to kind of talk and be with him the past couple of years and have NBA League Pass and watch games with him for sure.
Very true. So we'll move down to the East then, Michigan's quad.
Mm-hmm.
Any big upsets you see in the first round or second round?
There wasn't a ton in the first round that I could think of. I hate that LSU is an 8 seed because I think they're a lot better than an 8 seed. They lost the SEC tournament championship to Alabama, who's a 2 seed, by 1 point on Sunday. So I was very shocked that they were the number 8 seed in potential second round matchup with Michigan. St. Bonaventure has been a very kind of under the radar team as well. They're really solid. UNC Greensboro maybe against Florida State, just because Florida State has been a little hot and cold as of late. I mean, they lost to Georgia Tech in the ACC championship game in the tournament. So we'll see what happens with that. But then Florida State also has one of the top NBA prospects in Scotty Barnes. So like I said before, his ability to take over if need be. Georgetown and Colorado was an interesting kind of matchup for me, just because Georgetown's playing really hot right now. But it could also just be a Madison Square Garden thing. It could be just a Ewing getting pissed off that the security didn't recognize him at MSG, and he brought that energy to the rest of his team. But Colorado, I mean, they were one of the top finish in the Pac-12 this year. So other than that, I think, as much as I hate to say it, Maryland over UConn could be something to watch for. Not a huge fan of Maryland at the moment, even though we've beaten them 3 times in a row. I've never seen anyone getting under Juwan Howard's skin like they have as a coach. So it's Big Ten, probably on the last of my wanting to win, but I think they can still pull that upset off.
I think Michigan State has an interesting draw there. Obviously, they have to play that play-in game, but I think they can beat UCLA and then even BYU. Beat on the trader Matt Harms over there.
Right.
But I think like they've shown the ability to get hot and be able to create offense. I think Tom Izzo's his teams always find a way to defend. And so if they can find a way to score the basketball, I think they can find a way to win a couple games here.
Yep. And like you said, it's always hard to bet against Izzo in March. I know it hasn't been aside from when they went to the Final Four a couple years ago, few years there was a little earlier round exits than had previously been expected of them. But like you said, I could definitely see that as well.
How do you feel about Bama? Because I've seen a lot of people kind of showing them or picking them as a Final Four potentially. And I mean, they're a 2 seed. I don't know. I've been struggling whether or not how far I should put them. Do you have any thoughts on Bama for this one?
Some of my friends that I work with down here in Atlanta are from Alabama, so I've been kind of getting a little inside fan scoop from them. But like you said, they're kind of been a hot and cold team over the course of the year. So I really like one of their point guards, Devon Kinnerly. I think he was at Villanova last year and transferred to Alabama and was able to contribute a lot. He's just a playmaker. So being able to have a playmaker like that as a guard in the tournament is always beneficial. They're a team that I could see going to the Final Four, but I could also see them getting upset in the second round, Sweet 16 rounds as well, because you have Texas right there. That's going to be one of the best games of the tournament if they get to that point, because Texas and Shaka Smart, very similar to Alabama in my opinion in terms of being hot and cold this year. When they're really hot, they're really hot. But when they're kind of off, then they're beatable by anybody, as they've shown throughout the year. So I think it comes down to whichever team has the best leadership from a coach at this point in time. I haven't seen a whole lot from the Alabama coach, but I know he's gotten them to a point where they're 2 seed when they weren't really necessarily a major factor in basketball the last couple of years. But having Shaka Smart have that tournament experience as well with VCU is also going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that's a region where I think, like you said, it's a tough region. I think multiple teams could find their way out into the Final Four. Who escapes from that region, Keiton?
First off, Michigan. I have to say Michigan. But the next team that I can see is Texas, probably.
Yeah, I think if Michigan, like you said, if Livers can come back and give quality minutes, I think Michigan's going to be hard to put out just because of their inside ability, and then they can shoot the ball. I think that means a whole lot in March. If you can play defense and you can shoot it, I think that carries you pretty far.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that they're not having Livers, because if they had Livers, I would have put them in the Final Four automatically. But when they're not shooting the best, then they've been susceptible to closer games with teams that they were blowing out by double digits earlier in the year. So it's a team that I can see getting to the Final Four still, without a doubt. But if they don't have a great shooting night, then I could see a team like LSU or Florida State taking advantage of that and bouncing them early. I don't want it to happen, but I can see it happening.
So in the South region, Baylor, the number 1 seed over there, well deserved. I think everyone agrees on that.
Yep.
Is there any crazy upsets in the first or second round that you can see going on over there?
First one that caught my eye was Winthrop over Villanova. I think you guys know that as well, just because the injury to Gillespie is going to be massive for them. Having a guard as experienced as him, because I remember when he was a freshman and Michigan played them at Villanova. It was when they had Brazdeikis, and he was young and inexperienced, so he could show, but then he's been able to really pick up and become a Ryan Arcidiacono type player. So not having a floor general this late in the year is tough for any team to overcome. So I can see that. Might get a little bit of, this might be the surprise, but Colgate over Arkansas is one that I potentially saw, just because Colgate's one of the higher scoring teams in the country right now. That came against lesser competition, of course. But if you can score the ball and you can get hot in March, like, that's a recipe for an upset.
Yeah, I agree with the Winthrop pick. I didn't have too many crazy things going on here. One team that it wouldn't be an upset in the first round, but I kind of like, is Texas Tech. I think they've shown their ability to play in March in the last few years, and I think as a 6 seed, obviously they have a tough road to get there, but I think once again, I think they have the ability to make a little bit of a run if they get hot at the right times.
Yeah, without a doubt. Having the coach is Chris Beard, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, having his experience as a coach in the Final Four, I'm sure they still have a few players from that run, and the addition of Mac McClung for them has been huge. He was doing work at Georgetown and then he transferred, but he's definitely picked up right where he left off. I know a lot of people know him from his absurd dunking ability in high school, but he's a pure scorer. I mean, he broke Allen Iverson's Virginia high school scoring record, which is, you can't just do it with dunks. So he's definitely a certified bucket, and it's going to be interesting to see how they go out, because I agree they have a tough road to get there, but I mean, I think they can make some noise for sure.
I was a little disappointed that Colgate got Arkansas in that one, just because I have a hard time picking against Arkansas there. But I kind of, like how you said, I thought Colgate was a decent pick there. Rube, how are we feeling about Purdue on this side?
So I feel pretty good until Baylor. Obviously Baylor's good. I did see Chip Patterson on CBS picked him to go to the Final Four. So
really,
I think just strictly based on Travion Williams and his ability to score in the post, he creates troubles for anyone to guard. Even guys like Garza and Kofi Coburn have had trouble guarding him. But then Baylor's so good that their front court is,
They're
or
so balanced.
their back court is just incredible. That I have a tough time putting the young Purdue over Baylor.
Yeah, Travion's a beast. Like I remember him his freshman year, and he was making upperclassman type moves and getting those types of looks. And I'm like, he's gonna be a solid big, especially in the Big Ten. And I mean, you guys talked about it in your previous podcast, but Ivy is gonna be really good. He's already progressed so much, and he led them in scoring. No, he's second in scoring in the Big Ten tournament, besides Williams. But it's if you can have a big and a guard, I mean, that's one of the recipes for success in March.
How do you feel about the hometown Bucks?
I have them. Well, I have them Elite Eight versus Baylor, and I really want to see. And it's kind of a spoiler for the next part. I really want to see Ohio State, Illinois Final Four. So I kind of wiggled it so they beat Baylor. But that's what I have so far. But I could definitely see myself rearranging, and I don't know. There's so many variables at play that I could definitely question myself until then. But I really would love to see a rematch for that.
I do think Ohio State does have the right combination of guys to beat Baylor, though. They have a backcourt that can guard with C.J. Walker and Dwayne Washington Jr., and both of them are playing at an extremely high level on the offensive side as well. And then C.J. Liddell is a baller. So, I mean, they do have the capabilities to match up to a Baylor, which I don't think you can say about a lot of teams in this tournament.
It's true. Yeah, and matchups are one of the biggest things in the tournament. Because if you're a clearly better team, but if you get matched up against someone who can exploit weaknesses, then that's literally how Cinderella runs happen. As much as I hate to say it, Ohio State is definitely playing at a high level right now. Dwayne Washington is insane, and having a guard like C.J. Walker and a big like E.J. Liddell, and Suing has been really good on the wing too. He has over 20 points in the championship game. That's just depth is one of the biggest things in the tournament, without a doubt, in terms of making a big run and not just one or two upsets. So yeah, as much as I hate to say it, Ohio State's looking nice.
All right, so then going down to that Midwest region, Tom kind of alluded to it. The Fighting Illini, the number 1 seed there, coming off the Big Ten championship. Maybe they should have had both titles. We don't know. That might be a topic for a discussion later.
Take it up with good old Mr. 19.
Yeah. All right. So what do you kind of see happening in the first round over there?
One of my sleeper teams in this one to make a run is Oklahoma State. Might not be a real sleeper, but Cade Cunningham is the truth. And the thing is, it's not only him. He has a good supporting cast, and they've really been able to figure it out lately. West Virginia, I like. They're just so solid under Huggins. They've had one of the things that I've seen this year with a lot of the teams is that like 1 through 5, the size and length is just insane. So that just takes it up a whole nother level on defense and also being able to score on offense. Upset wise, the only one that I really saw opportunity wise was Syracuse over San Diego State. Syracuse played Virginia really tough in the ACC tournament. Oregon State, maybe, but Tennessee's also been kind of hot and cold this year, but they've had some really good wins as well. So this one's tough. I think that Illinois comes out of it without a doubt, just with how high of level they're playing at right now. But first round, those are the 2 upsets that I saw could happen.
Yeah, you mentioned Oklahoma State is extremely talented, but they've also been inconsistent. And I think something that Liberty does is they slow the pace down and they shoot the 3 at a very high clip. I think they're like 9th in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. And that's a recipe for an upset. I don't think it'll happen just because of the star talent on Oklahoma State, but there's a shot that there's an upset there early. And I think that you mentioned the Tennessee, Oregon State. Tennessee's been inconsistent on offense. They're going to guard no matter what, but it's just a matter of if they can hit shots. They'll probably come away with it, but there's another one to look at.
I do think Illinois's got a really tough run too, like a tough combination of teams they have to play. Like they have, OK State we've mentioned. There's even Chicago, Georgia Tech, that game, like, those aren't bad teams. And then, somebody like Houston or West Virginia, like those are all teams that can make it a really tough run. And that's on the top of a long Big Ten tournament run. So that was all going through my mind when I still put them Final Four. So I don't know what that says about them, but probably Big Ten bias as well. But
I saw Andy Katz has Rutgers beating Houston, and I don't know if he had him beating West Virginia and playing in the Elite Eight or not, but he has them making a little bit of a run. What are your guys' thoughts about that?
Yeah,
Geo
that's
Baker.
interesting. Sorry, no, you can go ahead first.
I was just saying Geo Baker.
Yeah, I mean Rutgers, they played in the Big Ten all year. They played a lot of the top teams really close, and I think that's going to help them in this. Like you said, battle tested, being able to handle literally any type of player and team that they're going to see. Houston is an interesting case just because they play in a conference that isn't the toughest. The last time I saw Houston in the tournament was against Michigan, and it almost bounced us until Jordan Poole hit the miracle shot. So it's tough to get a gauge on Houston because I haven't seen them play a whole lot. But anytime you win your conference tournament championship by 37 points, that's definitely something to take note of for sure. I know some IU fans aren't the biggest kind of fan of their coach, Sampson, but I mean he's been around the game for a long time. He knows how to win in terms of X's and O's, cleanly at least. But I can see Rutgers getting that win, but I think Houston might be one of the sleeper teams to make a run as well.
Yeah, so we've kind of gone through all the regions. We'll have Keiton, why don't you remind us of your Final Four, give us your championship game, and then who's winning it all?
So I've only been able to make one bracket so far. The Big Ten guy in me wants all those top seeds to get in: Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, and Illinois, but I know it's not going to happen. I think Gonzaga comes out of the region. I'm going to go Michigan down below to playing Gonzaga in the Final Four. I think Baylor and Illinois have the best shots, but I think it could be Ohio State as well. It's so tough to not pick a 1 versus 2 Elite Eight in every single region, especially this year. But I'm gonna go with West Virginia coming out of the bottom, even though I think Illinois is playing at a high level right now, and West Virginia hasn't traditionally done very well in the tournament in terms of making deep runs. But that was kind of the case with Virginia when they made their title run, is that they had always had a stigma of being really highly ranked, but never really getting to make that championship run. But I think West Virginia and Bob Huggins can put it together with their team that they have this year and make a Final Four run for sure. As much as I would love,
Huggins said he was chomping at the bit, so it's good to see from Huggy.
Yeah, he's one of the coaches that are still old school, and I love it. He's still, if you're going to recruit the player, he's not going to change his coaching style to make them feel like they need their feelings protected. He's going to let them know, and I love that style of coaching, even though it's not as prevalent today. So I think as much as it kills me, I think Gonzaga gets to the championship game. The Gonzaga Baylor final is something that I could definitely see. That's what I'm going to say right now. It's a potential rematch of the game that got canceled earlier and was never rescheduled. So I think it could be one of the really good championship games that we've seen in the past decade or so.
Tong, do you agree with that? You have some rebuttals. What are we dealing with down there in Tongland?
I also have Gonzaga in the finals. I have Ohio State, Illinois on the other side. I didn't want a third Big Ten, despite wanting to.
That's fair.
So as of now, I have Bama. Although I really don't feel great about that side at all, just in terms of knowing the teams well and being comfortable with that. But I have those 4 for now, and then I have Gonzaga, Illinois over Ohio State again, and then I have Gonzaga. So I have the boring number 1 overall, but I'm saying they go perfect.
Wow.
Oh, that would be a perfect run, wouldn't it? That'd be nuts.
And I think if I heard correctly, they'd have the most wins in a perfect season as well. So
that'd be crazy, even in a COVID.
Especially in a COVID season, that'd be crazy.
So
crazy story.
I have a very similar Final Four. I have Gonzaga, Baylor, Illinois, and then I have Texas coming out of the East. I like what Shaka Smart's doing down there. Then I'll go Gonzaga, Illinois in the final. I feel like everyone's doing that, but
Yeah.
and then I got to go with Io and Kofi and the boys. We're going to be celebrating here in Champaign, so.
But like if Illinois and Gonzaga meet in the championship game, I honestly like Illinois in that matchup because AO is going to match up with Suggs. You're going to get who would be on Kispert for them. It would be probably Frazier.
Probably, yep. Trent.
Or maybe flip those. And then you got Coburn on Timmy. I think Coburn wins that without a doubt. He's just being the massive and pretty skilled big that he is. I also am a huge fan of Curbelo. The fact that he's a freshman blows my mind with the amount of poise and pace that he plays with. He was making some big plays in the Big Ten tournament, and just being able to see one thing that I think is a big factor for the top teams in the Big Ten, like Illinois, Ohio State, and Michigan, is their culture. Being able to see that on the sidelines throughout this entire year, those are the teams that made their own energy when there was no fans in there. And that honestly is going to be, even though there's going to be some limited fans in the tournament, being able to have that type of bond with your teammates just helps you push through any sort of kind of run or drought that is happening against you and can really help in the tournament.
Yeah, I agree. I think you hit it on the head. So before we let you go, we'll end you with one question. What's your favorite March Madness memory?
Oh, without a doubt, Trey Burke against Kansas in the Sweet 16. I remember exactly where I was. My brother and sister were upstairs sleeping, and when he hit the shot, I almost yelled and woke everybody in the neighborhood up. But that was one of the games where it was like they were down the whole game, but they were still keeping it within reach. And I just had the utmost faith in Trey Burke at the times, because even though he wasn't shooting well at all that game, he still was able to come through in the clutch, and that will forever be one of my favorite March Madness memory.
I think I even remember where I was when that one. I think I was in like a rental house in Florida on spring break.
Mm-hmm. Just one of those iconic moments, without a doubt.
That was a pretty good team Michigan had.
Mm-hmm. They got, technically, they were the team that finished the furthest in that tournament since Louisville had it vacated. I mean, the national championship game that year, it was one of the games that I'll always remember. Having Spike go off as Battle of the White Boys in the first half. And then Trey Burke's block that gets called for a foul was one of the turning points of that game for sure. But yeah, it still doesn't beat a Kansas shot.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Well, Keiton, we thank you for your time. We can't wait to see your bracket on the top 10 of the leaderboard at ESPN here pretty soon. Yeah.
That perfect one.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I appreciate you, boys.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this episode.
As there's a drive in a deep left field by Castellanos, it will be a home run. And so that'll make it a 4-0 ball game.
Don't forget, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and comment down below. Thanks, guys. I saw a tweet. It was like, if we would have given the vaccine distribution to Chick-fil-A, we'd all be vaccinated by now.
Would have been a drive-through. Would have been the most efficient 2 weeks ever.